All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back to the Dharma Doors. I'm MC Owens, and this is the San Francisco Dharma Collective. Tonight, we're going to continue looking at the sutra that we started last week. So we're still in the Majjhima Nikāya. We're still on sutta number 77. If you weren't here last week, or you haven't watched the recording, it's kind of okay. I'm going to do a quick recap of the sutra. And actually, if you were here last week, you'll know we read in a way the whole sutra, but I didn't go into depth about the last part of it because I wanted to really go, to talk about it. So really, this is actually just going to be a kind of independent Dharma doors where we're going to be talking about basically meditation tonight, but really technical, like I would even call it high tech Buddhist meditation. So we're going to get into some interesting ideas. Specifically, if you happen to have the Wisdom edition, I'm over on page 636. But again, let me recap sort of the really quickly, let me give you the gist of the sutra. So we're in the little section of this collection where the Buddha's going around and he's been talking to the wanderers. So these are, you know, um, ascetics in that way, yogis, we might call them, but they're wanderers, they're practitioners, but they're not Buddhist. They're just sort of doing their own thing in that way. And one of the wanderers who happens to have like a little following is this guy Udayan, or he's also called Sakuludāyi. And the Buddha goes to see him one morning. Uh, the Buddha is staying at the squirrel sanctuary, and Udayan's staying at the peacock sanctuary where the wanderers are. And the Buddha gets up early, and it's too early to go beg for food. So he says, "Oh, I know. I'll go see Udayan and the wanderers at the peacock sanctuary." So he does. And basically, because there's a bunch of different teachers that are all staying at the peacock sanctuary, a question arises. And it's the question about basically revering the teacher, revering the Buddha, or actually revering the teacher. And everybody goes around, and basically it comes to the conclusion, Udayan comes to the conclusion that all of the Buddha, like Gautama, all of the Buddha's students revere him and rely on him, whereas a lot of other teachers, they have students that are rebelling against them or forming their own schisms and their own sects. But the Buddha, everybody loves the Buddha, everybody respects the Buddha. And the question arises, why is that? And actually, the Buddha asks Udayan and he says, "Oh, yeah, why do people revere me?" And Udayan says, "Oh, because you don't eat very much and you encourage other people to not eat very much. You don't care what you wear. You'll wear whatever robes and you encourage other people to just, wear whatever. Oh, you'll eat whatever people give you in your begging bowl. Number four, you'll sleep wherever. And number five, you like seclusion." So Udayan says, yeah, that's why we revere you, because you don't eat very much and you don't care what you wear and all of these things. And the Buddha does a very interesting thing where he reverses all of that. And what he says is, you know, sometimes I get invited to people's homes and I eat a lot. Whereas some of my students, they'll eat just a few seeds a day. And the Buddha says, so if if what you're saying is true, which is that I'm revered because I don't eat very much, then those students of mine that only eat a few grains, they shouldn't revere me because I'm eating more than they are. And he says the same thing regarding the clothes. He says, yes, sometimes I wear very nice robes that people give me, whereas some of my students, they wear rags. So if what you're saying is true, they shouldn't revere me. So the Buddha goes through all of those and says, I sometimes sleep in fancy houses if people invite me to sleep there. And the one regarding seclusion, he says, are you kidding me? I'm surrounded by students all the time and householders asking me questions. Like, I'm often not secluded. Whereas some of my students, they'll go 14 days out in the woods all by themselves. They shouldn't revere me then if it's because I am secluded. So those are these 5 things that Udayan says, oh yeah, that's why everybody likes you. And the Buddha says, no, that is not why everybody reveres me. Everybody reveres me for 5 other reasons. And we talked basically about most of these last week. So the first one the Buddha says is because he says, I am an aggregation of merit. He's basically saying, I'm an upright person. I'm a moral, upright person, and I practice what I preach, and I'm kind of an example of the morality that I teach. That's the first reason why people revere me, is I'm an aggregation of merit. The second reason he says is because I'm an aggregation of knowledge, meaning what the things that I say I know, I really know. I know what I'm talking about. I'm not theorizing. I know when I say I know something, I really know it. So that's the second reason the Buddha says he's revered. The third, he's an aggregation of wisdom. And basically the idea is that in any kind of debate, the Buddha wins every single time. So his logic or his wisdom is superior. So he's an aggregation of wisdom. So that's the third reason why he's revered. The fourth reason, he says, when students of mine come to me because they've experienced suffering, I tell them how it is. I tell them the Four Noble Truths. I tell them, yeah, it's suffering. I tell them, yeah, this is the cause of suffering. I tell them, this is the cessation of suffering, and this is the path to the cessation of suffering. So because I teach suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path leading to that, that's why people revere me, the Buddha says. Again, because I tell it like it is. And then there's the fifth reason why the Buddha is revered, he says. And he starts by saying, well, first, because I teach the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So I teach people to meditate. I teach them the 4 right efforts. I teach them to be diligent and determined, right? I teach the 4 methods of attaining spiritual superpower. I teach the 5 spiritual faculties. I teach the 5 powers. I teach the 7 factors of enlightenment. I teach the Noble Eightfold Path. That's most of what we talked about last week. And all of that, by the way, the 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 7, and 8 are the 37 aids to awakening. So if you've ever heard that phrase, the 37 aids to awakening, it's those specific lists of teachings. And that brings us to where we are in the sutra in terms of what we didn't really discuss. So again, if you happen to have this edition, I'm in section, or I guess section 8, paragraph 22. This is the 8 liberations. So the Buddha in the first part says, oh, I'm revered because I teach all of these methods, and these, again, all the teachings I just reviewed. And now the idea is that if you do all of that, meaning you're really good at the four foundations of mindfulness. You know how to put forth the right effort. You've walked the Riddhipada, the four steps to the superpowers. If you've done all of the preparatory work, now you're in a position to do these kind of deeper meditations. There's going to be a number of these, at least, yeah, there's going to be a bunch of these. I don't know how far we'll get. I don't want to rush through these because they're so technical. So we're going to take this sort of almost literally one word at a time. So the first thing is the Attaha Vimukha, the eight liberations they are called. So this is our first very technical term tonight. In the Buddhist tradition, they often use this term, and in Pali, the Pali language, they use vimukha. In Sanskrit, that is vimukti. Or you often just find not vimukha or vimukti. You often just find either mukti or mukha, or mokkha, I should say. And the root of that word is kaha or kriti. And it's too much to get into. But there's this idea in Indian religion that is basically the idea of moksha, liberation. Everybody is talking about liberation. But what is mukti or moksha or vimukti or vimuksha? Like what is this idea of liberation? Like, what are we talking about? Well, it's going to be different for every kind of tradition that you're going to encounter. If you're talking about like Ashtanga yoga, like traditional yoga, moksha means something. If you're talking about Jainism, like that other Indian religion that's a lot like Buddhism, but not exactly, they too talk about moksha, but it means something different for them. And then even within the world of Buddhism, moksha means something different. So I'm going to give you what I understand as the kind of mainstream Hinayana or early Buddhist idea of liberation. And specifically, as I understand it, something important about vimukha or vimukti in Buddhism, basically what is unique about it, as I've discovered, is that when we're talking about liberation, it is kind of specifically liberation from dukkha. So the suffering that the Buddha talks about, you know, stress, anxiety, worry, fear, all of that, that's dukkha. And so a moment, a state of not being afraid, of not worrying, of not stressing, not being anxious, being calm, being content, being at peace. That's, in Buddhism, that's moksha. What I'm getting at is, or what I want to, like, I guess what I'm alluding to is that in some traditions, liberation is like union with God, like union with the divine, total transcendence. Notice that in the Buddhist tradition, at least as I understand it, I defined it as just being at peace, not being afraid. So that's what we're working with tonight, is that idea of no dukkha. So first definition of vimukha or mukti is the idea of a pause on dukkha, a pause on suffering. The second aspect of especially these eight liberations that we're about to talk about, so the second thing about vimukha is that in Buddhism, mukti is kind of temporary. What I mean is that you kind of get into a state of no dukkha, and that is moksha. But then you get nervous again, or you get anxious again, and you have kind of slipped out of that state. This is also a little different because in other Indian traditions, moksha is final. Like if you've reached moksha or vimoksha, you're done. You made it. You are liberated forever. But in the Buddhist tradition, this word is used to describe a sort of temporary cessation of dukkha. A permanent cessation of dukkha in Buddhism is called nirvana, that the blowing out of that. So that's kind of where you get the permanent state of it versus a temporary state of the alleviation of dukkha. Everybody okay with generally what we're talking about? Now let's find out how to get there. How do we get into such a state of liberation from suffering? I don't know about you, but I would love to know how to achieve a state of liberation from suffering, right? So here we go. Again, 8 liberations. Again, Udayan, he says, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to develop the 8 liberations. Number 1, possessed of material form, one sees forms. This is the first liberation. Get it? Let's unpack it. So, for the rest of the night, the most important thing that we're going to need to really understand is what we mean by form, because we're going to be talking a lot about form. And because of that, I was thinking all day about I got to come up with a new example to talk about the realm of form. So let me remind everybody really quickly, if you haven't heard it recently or ever, in the world of Buddhism, the world in front of you, like the world, is actually sort of like there's 3 layers to the reality that you see before you. You might think it's just the world, like the world to be seen. But there's a more subtle way of looking at the world, and it's these 3 layers, what are known as the realm of desire, the realm of form, which we're going to be talking a lot about, and the formless realm. We're also going to talk about the formless realm. But we're going to be spending most of our time at the beginning in the realm of form. And I wanted to give you a good example of the difference between the realm of desire and the realm of form. And I want to kind of show you, to the best of my ability, I want to show you how those realms, the realm of desire and the realm of form, I want to show you how they're both right here. But it's sort of a matter of kind of what you're paying attention to. So what we kind of need to understand is that the basic idea is that there's a realm of what is just called the realm of pure form. And that realm of pure form is the realm of the elements: earth, water, fire, and air. Or, you can get fancy in terms of the periodic table of elements, all the way from hydrogen to the heavy metals. All that is, if you ask me, is a density chart of the earth element. So it's just the earth element in its very finer degree of only having one aspect of solidity, and that's called hydrogen. Two aspects of solidity, and that's called helium, and so on. So you can look at that. But my point is that the realm of form is just sort of like I don't even want to call it the natural world, but it is the elemental world. And the basic idea is that all creatures, all sentient beings, and in particular, sentient beings that reproduce with other sentient beings. That's a big part of this. But sentient beings that reproduce with other sentient beings are projecting onto the realm of form their desires. And those desires can take all kinds of form. But so the idea is there's kind of this realm of desire that is sort of us throwing onto the world a bunch of stuff. And then there's the world of pure form that's kind of underneath all of that. I came up with a good example, though, this afternoon that I think will help show you clearly the difference between those. You've all had this experience. And what it is it's when you say a word over and over and over and over and over until it's just the sound over, over, over. And it is no longer meaningful. Congratulations, you made it to the realm of form of the sound. So everybody get my example there, right? Where there's just what's going on, and then there's what you think it means. But you're doing that to everything. Ooh, my cup. Not glass, my cup. My cup versus a hunk of glass are two different things. It's a lot like the sound versus the word. So right there, I hope I showed you how the realm of desire and the realm of form are right here. And now you might notice how it would take a kind of subtle tuning of the mind to let go of that realm of desire in that way and to just sort of sink into the elemental world of pure form. Everybody got me on what we mean by just form. Rupa, by the way. This is what the word is, rupa. So now let's read the first liberation again. So, of the 8 liberations, the first level is that the meditator meditates on how this is pure form. This is material form. That's material form. So, possessed of material form, one sees material form. So this is an equalization. This is kind of an aspect of equanimity where one realizes, oh, wow, liquid, liquid, solid, solid, hot, hot. Not really moving, although moving a little bit, moving a lot. So elemental form, earth, fire, water, and air, earth, fire, water, and air. And what we're getting at is this total equalization that this is just made of the same thing as that. And allow me to kind of remind you, if you are really in the realm of form, there is nothing to get worked up about. That's how we transcend that realm of desire and get into that realm of form. And what I'm hoping to kind of point at is that's how it is a liberation from dukkha. Because if you're really just talking about water, water, earth, earth, what is there to be upset about in that realm of the elements? Are you upset that this is pure liquid and you're only partially 75% liquid? No, there's no beef. There's no problem in that way. So that's the first liberation, to see how this body of yours in that way is rupa and the world out there is rupa. Everybody see how that could be liberating. All right. By the way, another quick thing just came to mind. When we're talking about rupa, I want to remind you that we are talking about materiality, like physicality. But importantly, in Buddhism, early Buddhism, like this kind of Buddhism, we want to remember that there's rupa and there's namas, nama rupa, and namas is like mind stuff. What I'm getting at is that mind stuff, like a thought, it's not made of rupa, meaning it's not made of earth, water, fire, air. What I'm getting at, really, like what I'm trying to sneakily get up to, tomorrow is an idea. It doesn't have rupa. So if you're in the world or the realm of pure form, there is no tomorrow. There's no yesterday either. And so I want you to kind of start to feel how, like, oh, if I were in the realm of pure form where there was no attending to concepts like before and after, that would alleviate a lot of my anxiety. I don't know about you, but a lot of my anxiety is wrapped up in tomorrow. Right now, I'm stoked, actually. I am so happy to be here doing this. It's really just tomorrow that has me a little worried in that way. So if I were to just really be here in the realm of form, I would then not be worried about that. And if I were in the realm of pure form, for example, for example, there are many examples, but one example, if I were just attending to the realm of pure form, something going on with the body is just something going on with the body. It's another form. There's ideas that we can ascribe to that form, right? That like it's bad, it's dangerous, it's life-threatening, and all of that. But there's a tending to just the form as form. So I'm kind of just trying to again point out the subtler differences between the realm of desire and the realm of form, shape, size, all that stuff's not worth getting worked up about. Okay. Are we ready for the second liberation? Not perceiving form internally. One sees form externally. This is the second liberation. Now, I've been doing my homework all afternoon, trying to figure out what exactly this means. I know what I think it means. I know what my experience of this is, but I don't like to think my experience is, the be all to end all definition of these things. So I looked around to find out, what does it mean to not perceive form internally, but to perceive form externally? the general idea, and it's the idea that I kind of work with, is that this is about not attending to and not perceiving internality. Now, you could get philosophical about it and actually like completely negate that there is internality. Or you could think of it as just a state where you are no longer attending and paying attention to your liver, spleen, lungs, heart, all of the internal aspects of form. Only attending to the elemental realm of form in front of you, also as a state of liberation. Anybody have insights about that? Or now, in terms of our study tonight, we just want to pay attention that the first liberation is internal form, external form. Then it would seem that you get rid of the idea of internal form, again, either by not attending to it or it's not actually, there is no internal, only external. And then, number three, one is resolved only upon the beautiful. This is the third liberation. What could the Buddha possibly mean by, what was the, one is resolved only upon the beautiful. This is the one that actually I spent almost all afternoon deciphering, and it's tricky. It's tricky only because it's a bunch of ideas that we don't usually talk about in Dharma doors, but actually tonight is a bunch of new ideas for Dharma doors. So, Subbaha. So, Baha. At this point, we should be familiar. Baha is like Bahava, life, being. Subaha. Su is like beautiful, wonderful, smooth, and subtle. So Subbaha is, well, it's Subbaha, right? I wouldn't really want to go with beautiful because that actually makes it sound like it's some kind of like aesthetic determination, like where you're only going to pay attention to pretty things. No. The key is in the language of one is resolved only upon Subbaha. Subbaha is the highest heavenly realm of the realm of form. There are gods, there are called the Subha gods that live up there. And basically, like from everything that I have put together, that's what a lot of people would call heaven. And I mean that like in the Christian, like the Judeo-Christian way, where in Buddhist tradition, the Subha heaven, they're much, much higher heavens than that. But the descriptions of the Subha heaven, clouds and people playing like lyres and harps and full of light. My point is that being resolved only upon the beautiful means being determined to reach the highest heaven of the realm of form. Because there's levels to this. And meaning that there's like, you could get into the realm of form, but it could get deeper and deeper and deeper in that way. And if you get to like the deepest levels of just the realm of form, the descriptions are things kind of start emitting their own light. And that's when you know that you're getting close to that highest heaven in that way. Now, you can read this sort of, well, theologically, like that way, where we're talking about some sort of actual like heavenly realm. You could think of it psychologically, that we are getting kind of psychologically rid of all of that desire, more and more and more of it. And it's just getting you into a deeper and deeper kind of blissful state. So the third liberation is this meditation on form, but exclusively this subtle, rare level of form that is the Subbaha heaven. Everybody doing okay with that level? And by the way, these are, for me, these are not unheard of meditative experiences. That when people describe meditation, they sometimes describe seeing things. We're actually, tonight, we're going to do a lot of talking about seeing things during meditation. And so that kind of drive or resolve towards Subbaha, again, I would not read it as beauty or like, again, the beautiful. It's a particular idea in that way. Everybody okay with the first three liberations? Let's keep going, and then we'll recap all of them in that way. But number 4, now we're going to start getting on solid ground now. So, with the complete surmounting of perceptions of form, with the complete disappearance of perceptions of sensory impact, with non-attention to perceptions of diversity, aware that space is infinite, one enters upon and abides in the Akasha Ayatana, in the base of space, or the base of infinite space. So, form is the first liberation. Only form is the second liberation. Only Subbaha is the second liberation. And then with the complete surmounting of all perception of rupa, one enters upon and abides in the realm of infinite space. If you haven't seen it, allow me to lead you into the realm of infinite space. So I'm going to grab something over here real quick. So this realm of infinite space is our introduction. It is our entry to the formless realm. So the first three liberations are liberation in the realm of form. Form, only subha form, only subtle form. But then there's the surmounting of rupa. There's the surmounting of that very elemental realm of earth, water, fire, air, and then it's abiding in this realm of infinite space. So we need to talk about space, akasha. So, and a very, very important thing is that space is related to the elemental realm of form. But the most important thing for right now is to know that space is not a thing. It's not a fifth element, like alongside earth, water, fire, and air. No. Space has no color, no size, no shape. Size, color, and shape are determined by space. You need space to conceive of those things. But space is not one of those things. So let me walk you through this one. So I like to use this example. So just for fun, just for the sake of the lesson here, I want you to imagine that this is not a an optical illusion. Rather, I want you to imagine that there's been like a knock on the door and you're looking just through a little peephole, little keyhole. And when you look through the keyhole, you see something that looks like that. And maybe at first you thought it was two people, but then you saw it again and you realized it was somebody kind of holding up a goblet or like a wine glass, right? Because that's the optical illusion, right? That if you pay attention to the white, you see the faces, but if you pay attention to the black, you see the goblet or the candlestick or the glass. So form, the realm of form would be the faces, and the realm of space is this, the space in between the two faces. Because you know why? If there was no space, there would only be one face. So in order for you to perceive, excuse me, in order for your consciousness to perceive two faces, it needs that space. But what I want you to notice is that when the mind attends to this is space. So notice that space and form are in this really interesting relationship. Now, I often also talk about form, and the reason why you can see two hands is because of all of the space between them. And if there was no space, it would be one hand. They would be, as we say in English, occupying the same space. But when things are separate, they are not occupying the same space. But if I were talking about my fingers, I want you to notice that now this is space. Even though it's like solid, in order for you to conceive of just the fingers, your consciousness understands space, meaning not finger. So if you put those examples together, I want to show you something very interesting. I already showed you how these are the faces and this is space. But if this is the object, this is space. Oh, so it's all space. I guess it depends upon how you look at it. That's kind of what we've been talking about all night in terms of the realm of desire, realm of form, and formless realm. It depends upon how you look at it. If you are looking at it with all of your anxiety and you're just throwing all of your anxiety on something, you are getting the realm of desire right back in your face. But you could realize that, oh, I'm just projecting that. There's just the form. But then we've gone a level deeper where we're actually investigating the differentiation of bodies of form. And we're realizing that there's this sinuous realm of space everywhere, like in between everything. And so you could just attend to the space, which is everywhere. And then if you did that, the base of your meditation would be the formlessness of space. That's the fourth liberation, the formless realm of space. By the way, traditionally, of course, if you are in such a state, there's no form to be aware of. So there's no colors, there's no sounds, there's no smells, there's no flavors, there's no feeling of the body. There is mind consciousness that is aware that there is the experience of infinite space. There is that. So there's still something going on here. Everybody ready to go a level deeper? With the complete surmounting of the base of infinite space, being aware that consciousness is infinite, one enters upon and abides in the base of infinite vijnana, infinite consciousness. This is the fifth liberation. By the way, I just remembered something in the fourth liberation that I want to emphasize. So the language of infinite space, of how do you move into the realm of infinite space out of the realm of form? Well, through the complete surmounting of perceptions of form. With the disappearance of perceptions of sensory impact, and then this is the one that I wanted to stress, with the non-attention to perceptions of diversity, to the non-attention to perceptions of diversity. That's how you enter the realm of infinite space, through the non-attention to perceptions of diversity. Then I also was mentioned that when you're in that realm of infinite space, there's really just a kind of consciousness that's aware of that infinite space. So then it makes sense that with the surmounting of the base of infinite space, all we would have left is consciousness. And indeed, that's the fifth, the fifth liberation, just consciousness. Not conscious of anything, just consciousness. By the way, this is not consciousness of consciousness. It's not conscious of anything. It's just what I like to call the residual hum of consciousness. Meaning you've been being conscious for so long that once you're on the realm of infinite space and there's not much to really think about, your mind settles down, but there's still like residual activity. And so when you remove all objects, even space, I find that there's just this residual hum of consciousness. Again, it's not conscious of anything. It's just sort of like the wheel slowly coming to a stop. And that leads us to the next liberation, which is by completely surmounting that base of infinite consciousness, there's awareness that there's nothing. Akimchanya. And aware that there's nothing, one enters upon and abides in the base of nothingness. And this is the reason why I was kind of leading you in this direction in terms of taking away all of the anxiety to worry about, then even taking away all of the diversified form to worry about, leaving you just with space, taking away space, the residual hum of consciousness. Now there's nothing aware of anything. And this is, and I was reminded recently that I did a kind of a Dharma talk on this a long time ago. I called it the samadhi of skateboarding. But what I talked about is that there's a very interesting phenomena, and it happens in skateboarding a lot, but it happens in a lot of sports events in particular. Um, it's usually during like high levels of concentration and physical activity. But what happens in skateboarding often is that in the middle of performing a very difficult trick where the skateboarder is very concentrated, they black out. And then they become aware again and they're rolling away, having successfully landed the trick. And what that means to me is that at that level, there was such a state of concentration that this habit of self was no longer useful. And so it just zoop, there's no experiencer for a moment. For me, that is entering this nothingness where there's literally nothing. But then you come out of that experience. And that's the important part, is having gone through that experience. So in meditation, there seems to be a similar state where there's like a lapse in time. I've had this experience in meditation where there's just unaccounted for large chunks of time where there was no awareness of anything. And so for me, that is that period of the base of nothingness. And then by completely surmounting the base of nothingness, one enters upon and abides in the base of neither perception nor non-perception. This is the seventh liberation. So, neither samnya nor asamnya, neither perception nor no perception. So this is a very neither nor. We are beyond the liberation of nothingness. Is there perception beyond that? No. Is there not perception beyond that? No. It is neither perception nor non-perception. My general understanding of that is that beyond the liberation of nothingness, there is a type of perception, but it's not what you're thinking of as perception, because you're probably thinking of me perceiving it. This is not that, so it's not samnya, but it's not a state of being kind of blacked out in a state of nothingness. It's not that nothing is going on, like in the liberation of nothingness. So it's neither perception nor non-perception. A quick reminder, before the Buddha became a Buddha, all of the teachers that he studied with considered this to be the highest state a human being could reach, the state of neither perception nor non-perception, because it was considered a kind of godlike state of omniscience, because you are having perception but not a localized perception. So it was considered a divine state, seemingly. But by completely surmounting that base of neither perception nor non-perception, one enters upon and abides in the complete cessation of perception and sensation or feeling. This is the eighth liberation. And thereby, the Buddha says, many disciples of mine abide having reached the consummation and perfection of direct knowledge. So, deepening states, the most important thing I think for me, kind of as like a teacher in that way, I would hope that you see the kind of the logic of the progression. The achievability of these states, that's tricky. But I hope to convey to you the logic of what the process is seemingly about in that way. So I do want to talk about the next section, even though it's even yet more complicated, but there's so many ideas that are like in the air right now that it would take too long next week to get back here. So I definitely want to dive into the next section, but I don't want to move too quick. Everybody okay with those 8 liberations? And generally, a lot of it we've heard before, but not quite in that way. Yeah. All right, let's dive into the next section. So these next one, section 9, these are called Abhi Baha'atana or Ayatana. So higher or transcendent ayatanas. There's that word again. Let's talk about it. So the sutra keeps using the word the base of infinite space, the base of consciousness. So in ayatana is, well, there's different types of ayatanas or bases, but I kind of want to remind everybody that a really good example of an ayatana is if you have a digital camera and there's the sensor, the light sensor that captures the image, that's an ayatana. This is an ayatana. The eyeball is an ayatana. The ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, the brain are ayatanas. They are bases of experience. So if you're looking at me right now using your eyes, this is the base of visual awareness. Now, if you were meditating on the base of visual awareness, that is not meditating on what you are seeing. It's kind of meditating on sight itself or hearing itself. What's really interesting is that when you go into the formless realm, the base of your experience is not the eyes, not the ears, not the nose, not the tongue, not the body, not the brain. The base is space. Like, so that's very subtle that the foundation of your experience is not your brain or your eyes. It's space, consciousness, and so on. So those are all ayatanas. So we've been talking about ayatanas for a while in this chapter now. And this section is about the abhiyayatanas. So these like I thought the base of infinite space was pretty transcendent. Well, this is the abhi. And I want to remind you that whenever you see that prefix, abhi, like abhidharma, abhivinya, abhiyatana, like whenever you see abhi, it means out there, right? All right. So these are the 8 transcendent bases. So the Buddha says to Udayan, again, Udayan, I have proclaimed to my disciples the way to develop the 8 bases of transcendence. Number 1, perceiving form internally, one sees forms externally. Limited, fair, and ugly, by transcending them, one perceives thus. I know, I see. This is the first base for transcendence. So, I have to tell you that there is a lot of information about this, but it is all over the place. The interpretations of this are all over the place. So let's kind of try to walk through this. This is really tricky for me because there's what it says here, and then there's this very long tradition of what everybody says is being said here. So I'm going to try to walk you through the difference between that, just sort of like what's being said and then what people say is being said. So we're back to basically the formula that we saw before. The first level of this is perceiving form internally. So perceiving your bodily organs, but just in terms of their form, their shape, their material makeup. So very like a surgeon, just very matter of fact awareness of the bodily internal form. It says one sees forms externally. That's the same language that we heard before. Form inside, form outside. But this says that one sees forms externally that are limited, fair, and ugly. And then by transcending them, one perceives thus, I know, I see. So the tradition of this, of the interpretation of what's going on here, it's the tradition of what is known as a nimitta. 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 A nimitta is a lot like a lakshana. So if you're a student of mine, you've heard the word lakshana a lot, a characteristic. A nimitta is basically a characteristic. If you get really, really technical, a nimitta is an inalienable characteristic, like a characteristic that you cannot remove from something. Whereas there's a bunch of characteristics like, oh, I don't know, beautiful. Something being beautiful, that can change. Like if it were beautiful because it was, whatever, pristinely white, and all of a sudden it got stained. If it were no longer beautiful, that shows that that characteristic of beauty was not in like fixed. So it was alterable. But there's certain characteristics that are so essentially part of something that the Buddhists use the term nimitta for that type of characteristic. And in particular, what we're talking about right now is the nimitta of earth, water, fire, and air. Because remember, we're talking about the realm of form. And the only thing going on in the realm of form is solidity, liquidity, temperature, and movement. Earth, water, fire, and air. That's it. So in the tradition, what they're talking about is one perceives form internally, and then in front of you, almost as a hallucination or as a visualization, and this is where there are a lot of different people presenting what is going on here. But the nimitta, it's like, it's so subtle. In English, what we would say is like, there's a suffix in English, ness. And so if I had like a pile of dirt in my hand, or I could even talk about my hand, there's the earth aspect of it, which is that it is solid, it is earth. And then there's the like earthiness. And I want you to kind of subtly notice that there's earth and then there's earthiness. And those are two different things. So the quality of being earthy, that's the nimitta. And the nimitta of an element like the earthiness or wateriness or fieriness or windiness, that nimitta appears before the meditator. And it can appear as kind of like ugly in the sense that like you are not thrilled to be seeing it, or it could appear as very beautiful. And it has a limited like zone. I should have said this at the beginning. I've never experienced this. I don't do this type of meditation. I particularly am not really interested in this type of high-tech meditation. So I want to put that out there. Everything I'm getting is either from traditional commentary or modern practitioners that are discoursing about this. I wouldn't even interpret this that way, but I want you to know that that's how it's interpreted. So when they talk about one sees forms externally limited, fair, and beautiful, or fair and ugly, that is the appearance of a nimitta. And again, you'll find a bunch of different explanations for what it means for the nimitta to appear before you. But then the idea is that you shouldn't get hung up on that nimitta appearing before you. You should transcend it. So that's the next part of that. So perceiving internally or perceiving form internally, one sees the nimitta or perceives form externally, limited, fair, and ugly. And then by transcending that, one perceives thus: I know, I see. If you read the footnotes on this, this is actually really important. I was really excited to read this footnote because it's something that I've been teaching for a very long time, but I've kind of just been teaching it because it was taught to me and because it's my experience. So I was very stoked to hear the footnotes confirm this idea. There's a technical word for what's being spoken about there in terms of the realization. I know, I see. But very, very quickly, what they're talking about is that this experience of seeing the nimitta, you remember after it happened that while I was meditating, I saw the nimitta. Oh, I saw it. That's the footnote here. And this is something that I mention a lot in terms of like when we were talking about the formless realm of infinite, sorry, when we were talking about the formless realm of nothingness. And I was saying that, yeah, you get into this meditative state where there's nothing. And then you get out of that, and only then do you look back and say, oh, I was in the state of absolutely nothingness. But the whole point of being in the state of nothingness is that there's nothing going on. So there can't be a kind of awareness that I'm in the state of nothingness. It's only after the fact. The same thing's going on with these appearance of the form. All right. So again, I warned you. I have not had this experience in that way. So now we can pretty quickly move through the rest of these. So number 2, perceiving form internally. One see. Oh, I'm not actually. I'm not even going to mention something. I'm not even going to mention it. It's another part of the commentary that I don't want to get into. So just stick with what we were talking about. Number 2, perceiving form internally. One sees that nimitta form externally, but this time it's immeasurable. It's not limited, it's immeasurable. Also, fair or ugly. By transcending that, one perceives thus: ah, I know, I see. And this is the second base of transcendence. So the same thing's going on where you're meditating internally. In the commentary tradition, so I'm telling you the thing that I wasn't going to tell you, but in the commentary tradition, when it talks about perceiving form internally, they say that this is different than the one before this. And that in this one, when you are perceiving form internally, you are either meditating on the whiteness of your teeth, the redness of the blood in your veins, the yellowness of your skin, or the blueness of your eyes, they say. And those 4 colors, the blueness that I know it's a little Aryan, I know, but the idea that you're meditating on either like the whiteness internally, that is sort of an aspect of the realm of form. These 4 colors They're going to pop up, by the way, in a second, which is why I decided to mention it. So what they're talking about is not meditating like exactly on the earth element internally, but this aspect of the color palette. And that's going to actually make sense in a moment if we get there. We're going to get there. So the second one is that you're meditating on form internally, maybe on the whiteness or the redness or what have you, perceiving this elemental nimitta externally, but it's immeasurable, fair or ugly in that way. And then you transcend it. Next up, not doing that, not perceiving form internally, one sees that nimitta form externally, limited again, fair and ugly, but by transcending that, one perceives thus, ah, I know, I see. And this is then the fourth transcendence. Once again, not perceiving form internally, one sees forms externally, that nimitta form externally, but now again, it's immeasurable, fair and ugly. And then one perceives or transcends that, one perceives, thus I know, I see. And then that's the fourth transcendence. So everybody kind of see those, how those work. Next up, though, not perceiving form internally, so you're not paying attention to internal forms at all. One sees a form externally, like out in front of you. Blue color, blue in appearance, blue luminosity. It looks just like a flax flower, which is blue color, blue in appearance with blue luminosity. Or it's just like Benares cloth, smoothened on both sides, which is blue of blue color, blue in appearance, with blue luminosity. So too, not perceiving form internally, one sees this blue form externally with blue luminosity. By transcending it, one perceives thus, ah, I know, I see. This is the fifth base of transcendence. By the way, for all of my students that are taking my flower garland sutra class, the flower adornment, this is a lot of where that idea comes from. By the way, seeing these blue flowers in the sky while you're meditating, a lot of the Avatamsaka Sutra is kind of a riff on this. So I just wanted to put that out there. So this is some kind of, again, a kind of trippy, maybe psychedelic experience that's happening of seeing this kind of blue-ish flower thing in front of you. Next up, though, not perceiving form internally, again, one sees forms externally. This time, yellow, of yellow color, yellow in appearance, with yellow luminosity, just like a kinkara flower, which is yellow, of yellow color, yellow in appearance, with yellow luminosity. Or just like Benares cloth, smoothened on both sides, which is yellow, yellow color, yellow in appearance, with yellow luminosity. So too, the meditator, not perceiving form internally, sees this yellow form externally, with yellow luminosity. By transcending those yellow forms, one then perceives, ah, I know, I see. This is the sixth base of transcendence. Once again, not perceiving form internally, one sees a form externally. This time red, of reddish color, red in appearance with red luminosity, just like a hibiscus flower, which is red, of red color, red in appearance with red luminosity, or again, just like Benares cloth, smoothened on both sides, which is red, of red color, red in appearance with red luminosity. So too, again, the meditator not perceiving form internally, one sees these red forms externally, which are red luminosity. By transcending them, one perceives thus, oh, I know, I see. This is the seventh base of transcendence. And then, once again, not perceiving form internally, one sees forms externally. This time, white. Sorry, lost my place. Right. White in appearance, with white luminosity, just like Venus, the morning star, which is white. Of white color, white in appearance, with white luminosity, or just like Benares cloth. Smooth and on both sides, which is white of white color, white in appearance, with white luminosity. So too, the meditator not perceiving form internally, one sees forms externally with white luminosity. By transcending them, one perceives thus, ah, I know, I see. This is the eighth base for transcendence, and thereby many disciples of mine abide having reached the consummation and perfection of direct knowledge. All right. So, any questions about the colored luminosity, the realm of form, anything we've talked about tonight? Once again, I want to remind you all that these are that many meditators in the modern world report these types of experiences. So I don't want to make it sound like this is totally out there. People are having these experiences. I think one of the things that we should consider is the all of this language about um, um, the exact language. Sorry. Ah, transcending them. So once again, like a lot of Buddhist teachings about meditation, a lot of the teachings are sort of warnings about things that are going to happen to you. And it's not like things you're trying to make happen to you. They're just saying if you kind of do this type of meditation, you're going to start seeing these types of things. And don't get too hung up on them, transcend them because there's further to go in that way. So I want to make it clear that I don't read this as like meditate until you see white flowers. And until you see white flowers, like you're not doing it right. The Buddha says, by the way, at the end of at the end of each of these sections, he says, yeah, many of my disciples have achieved liberation this way. Not all of them, many of them. Meaning this is one way to do it. This is one way to do it. And by the way, this is in the commentary tradition, that these are techniques. These are ways to do it. And there's even in the suttas, there are descriptions of certain monks who kind of specialize in certain practices. And not all the monks are doing it. Not all the practitioners are doing it. So if if you're not into this, if you're like, I don't know about all that, fine. Like it's again, it's not a requisite in that way. So, but again, any questions or comments about any of this? Like, yeah, Maria.
Thank you. This is very interesting. Lots of stuff to think about. So is this the stuff with the colors? I can't remember what it's called. The practice where you make the disc
That's
and you
the next
meditate.
section. The
Okay,
casinas.
okay. Cool. And then the only other thing I wanted to add is, whoa, I remember when I was a kid, I used to say words over and over again until they lost their meaning. And what was so cool, I remember about it in the context of this conversation, is that certain words did it more readily than other words. Like, what? Things kind of hold on to that. Certain things are more fixed I guess, in my mind, and they're, looser with other things.
Yep.
So interesting. So cool.
Excellent. I'm so glad that my sound word analogy fit. I want to kind of remind everybody again about that one because it's just so subtle. There's the realm of form, which is about like paper, and then there's the meaning, which is like what you would do with this. That's exactly like the sound of the word versus like what it means. This is the visual object, and then notice that what you're bringing to it. It's exactly like the word and the sound of the word. So, and again, it's everything. So any object in that way can be a little portal to the realm of form. But but Maria, you mentioned the kasinas, and the kasinas are the next section. And because we've talked about it, I want to mention because a lot of you probably know about the kasinas. They're kasinyatanas. So they are ayatanas, but they're called kasina ayatanas or kasinyatanas. So they're bases, more bases in that way. So we're going to spend probably the whole next Dharma doors just talking about the 10 kasinas. So any other comments, questions, ideas? Noe?
I thank you so much. I don't there was forgive me, but it's that idea of I wake up and it's fascinating to wake up. For me it's like I sometimes mostly I'm in a dream, but and then of course I physically wake up from the dream, but before the dream there's this moment of a now I know I'm dreaming. I know I'm not awake, but my mind tends to think, well, where was I? Where was that? What was that? And it's lovely. So I guess I typed the word. Uh, there's something here to Buddha. Awake. Oh, where now? Well, here. So it's lovely that when I go to sleep at night, I'm excited for sleep. I'm released from all. It's just like, oh yeah, and then something happens, and but it's lovely, and this points to it and thank you. You pointed it to it in in a very unique way. Is that yeah, my mind wants to put names and labels and conversations and explain it and interpret it, and yeah, it's not necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Noe. Yeah, I think it's about kind of understanding when it's just on autopilot and it's just out of habit in that way. Yeah. Nice. Anybody else? Any comments, ideas? I could of course talk all night, but I will save it for next week. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for being here tonight. I appreciate it so much. Always great to see you all.